So now I'll introduce our speaker. His name is Dan Schaller, and he is the Sea Turtle Preservation Society Director of Stranding and Salvage Activities. Dan is a 30-year active duty Marine Corps retiree who moved with his wife to the area in 2017 to help sea turtles survive while enjoying retirement life in Florida. As a volunteer, he manages the Sea Turtle Preservation Society Rescue and Salvage team of 24 STPS volunteers. The team conducts the majority of the sea turtle stranding and salvage operations throughout Brevard County under the Marine Turtle Permit Authority from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Dan is also active as a permitted volunteer with sea turtle nest surveys and evaluations, which I believe you were out on the beach a bit today, this morning. So he's very authentic. He's actually Sandy. And he is also a board member for the Sea Turtle Preservation Society. So without any further ado, thank you so much, Dan.
Okay, thanks. First, I really want to thank all of you for the passion that you have, helping out everything from the lagoon and all the, conservation efforts and all that. So thanks for being here today. Everybody's busy nowadays, and it's pleasant to see the interest for things like sea turtles. So looking across the crowd that's here with us right now, I see some of the experts that are been around STPS, Sea Turtle Preservation Society, for a while. So I'm glad they're here, and they can definitely back me up. So if I don't know the answer to some of these questions, I'm going to look at Dory and Roger and all these folks. So Dory's actually I'm giving props to her. She's the nest survey permit holder that I fall under, also doing nest surveys, which it's winding down right now. And then Roger is my predecessor, who used to run the stranding and salvage for quite a few years. So both of them have taught me immense things about sea turtles. My background is not sea turtles. I do tell people I'm a Marine, not a marine biologist. I say that smiling. I do have a good sense of humor, I think. But so if you see me smiling during this, I'm notorious for smiling and having a good time. And that's why we moved to Florida. One of the big reasons, besides retirement time, was to help out sea turtles. We've been scuba diving, the wife and I, for many years. And I always knew that when she was diving, I'd look over at her, and if there's a sea turtle in the water, there would be, even with a regulator in her mouth, I could sense a huge smile on her face. So hence moving to Florida and trying to help these little guys and gals out. So a lot of information in this presentation. I'm going to kind of cruise through pretty quick. Make sure the thing didn't go on. Is it working now?
There you go. You're good.
Did I break it? Okay. I could literally talk for hours about this. I love talking about the experiences in my limited time dealing with sea turtles and everything. But I pulled this from our 101 class. It does have some good information, not insulting anybody's intelligence on sea turtles, but I'm going to talk a lot about them and a little bit about STPS. And of course, I love to talk about stranding. So I got a couple slides about the strandings and the salvage we do and things like that. So probably when you're moving the mouse, it's taking it from you or something.
There you go.
Okay. Make sure you go back. Okay. First off, Brevard County. Whoop. I think we're in Florida for sea turtles. So obviously the sea turtles, it's an indicator of the ocean's health. If there's not a lot of sea turtles in an area you think there should be, or there historically has been, a lot of times it could be due to the health of the failing or the decreasing health of the ocean in that area, the waterway. Plays many roles. It helps control habitat. It provides check and balances for the food web. And also, a lot of people don't think about it, but it nourishes the beachhead area too, when they lay their eggs. Unfortunately, they don't all make it. That's why we are glad they have just a ton of them out there, probably way more than a metric ton, but thousands and thousands. I'm going to show some numbers later. I mean, Florida is just amazing with the amount that we receive, but they don't all make it. And even the hatchlings or even the eggs provide nourishment for the beach. And of course, I don't like saying it, but it's the food chain thing that helps out other animals too. So, all right. I do want to start off though, there's different types of turtles out there. In our hotline, we get calls all the time for gopher tortoises and pelicans and all that. And I don't want to say we don't love the other animals, but we do concentrate on sea turtles. So we have tortoises, like the gopher tortoises that we all love and see them waddling around. And terrapins, pretty much every body of water, I think, in Florida around here, if it doesn't have a gator, it's probably got, if it does have gators, it may have some of these running around there too, so the soft tails and all that. And then last but not least, our beloved sea turtles. So that's what we're going to talk about here today, okay? And don't ask me too many questions about the other ones. I don't know, except that I know that they snap and things like that. So bottom line, all three of these classes here, they all are cold-blooded, they got scales, they lay eggs, and I continually remind people they breathe air. because we do have people that drop off little hatchlings that are very lethargic. They don't have much energy. And then they pour a ton of water in there, like 2 inches of water. And then when we get them, they're drowned. And I'm like, remember, they don't have gills. They have to breathe air. So you may hear me harping on that again later. So what makes a turtle a sea turtle? Adaptations, the modified flippers. You know, a lot of people don't realize they can't, pull their head into the shell and all that stuff like certain tortoises can and things. Years ago, they've been around for 110 million years. We got, fossils and all that good stuff saying they're pretty much dinosaurs that are still around. So they live in not just the ocean, but brackish water. So a lot of people, I've only been here 5 years living in Florida now, but I recover a number of turtles in the lagoons or the rivers. And I'm always surprised locals go, wow, I didn't know sea turtles live in the rivers here. And I'm like, they do. Unfortunately, so do a lot of boaters that go by. So a lot of them we recover, the stranding team, are historically hit by, they get hit by props and stuff like that. So we'll talk about that later. Turtles found in the waters here, though. We all know the loggerheads, hopefully. That's the most common that we see down here. It's in the threatened status. Green, for our coast, it's threatened status also. And leatherbacks. Those are, I always tell people, those are the three primary species of sea turtles that come and visit us regularly here. Of course, loggerheads the predominant. A lot of greens, and then if you see juveniles, it's probably going to be greens because they like to come back and live off the algae, seagrass, and we all know seagrass is kind of declining. Manatees have been suffering because of that and everything too, but we do get a lot of those juvenile greens, like for rescues and stuff. We take a lot of those to the hospital out here, the Sea Turtle Healing Center at the zoo. And of course, leatherbacks, we get occasional leatherbacks. We see the little hatchlings coming out and all that. We have a few nests. And then I actually had my first stranding this year of a leatherback carapace shell, which was pretty big because they get big. So, all right, hawksbills, we see a few of those around here, not too many. And Kemp's Ridleys are kind of rare too. Well, we've had strandings on Kemp's Ridley. You're gonna hear me say stranding a million times today, but my record is 2 Kemp's Ridleys stranded in 1 day. At Cocoa Beach, I was finishing up there and got the call, hey, we got one up at Canaveral or 8 turtle. I went and investigated it, and it was another Kemp's Ridley. And I was like, wow, 2 in 1 day for a pretty rare species around here. So these are the 5 of the 7 species in the world of sea turtles that do come and visit us occasionally. Our usual visitors and the occasional visitors there. All right, loggerhead, Coretas, of course, that big scientific name, and I'm not going to pronounce most of the rest of them, but a lot of people, when you see their skulls, and I've got a slide in here that shows the skulls, you think that's like one of the biggest. Besides, everybody knows leatherbacks are like the biggest out there. But strangely enough, the greens, on average, greens are a little bit bigger than the loggerheads. Now, their heads are way smaller than the loggerheads, and that's hence how it got its name, loggerhead. But just a very robust, strong skull, because that's what they like to live off of, is things that they can bite, mollusks and all those things, shelled animals. All right, and it is, like I said, named for its head. That is definitely the predominance of what we see. The majority of the nests, you'll see the numbers later, it's loggerheads, Coretas. All right, greens, everybody loves greens because they are a beautiful turtle. Somebody just the other day told me, and she's probably listening out there on Zoom land, she said greens are the models of the sea because they're so beautiful and all that. When they're little hatchlings, they're full of energy, they got good sized flippers, and they're nice to photograph, okay? But the greens do get a little bit bigger typically when they reach adulthood and all that. Adulthood for these, a lot of people don't realize, is about 20, 25 years before the females come back to nest. That's a long time. That's a lot of battling to live that long too. So olive brown color, dark streaks, and I mentioned earlier the diet for the adult greens is primarily sargassum, or it's seaweed and algae and things like that. So named for the color of its fat, which is green because of its diet. All right, leatherbacks. Well, I call them DCs. That's the easy way to say that, right? Most of them weigh about 500 to 1,500 pounds. They've actually documented leatherbacks are over 2,000 pounds. So those are the big ones. And I've even doing some deep sea fishing out here. I looked over, we were trawling. I looked over and there was a huge leatherback. It looked like a Volkswagen Beetle just kind of crushed in the water. And of course I wanted to, fishing from my phone instead of, grabbing the pole. I'm like looking over and priorities. Of course, he was long gone since we were going one direction, trawling and all that stuff, but pretty impressive. If you haven't seen one, we had one, I think it was last year. I like to say it's a model, the perfect example of how our hotline works very well. STPS has a hotline. You're going to hear me say that over and over too, and call it if there's any problems with sea turtles that you encounter. But somebody called the hotline. We got in touch with UCF. They do fantastic work out here. We talked to their nest survey people because it was a daytime nester, and it happened that it's not real, it's kind of rare for daytime nesters around here. It's usually maybe pimps or something like that, but it was actually a leatherback that was out there. So we kind of got the wheel turning. UCF had somebody go out for their nest survey team, and it actually had flippers on its rear tag. So I love the example because it worked. The engine worked perfectly, and they were able to record the numbers. So that went into the studies for the smart people to know that where that turtle's been and all that, where that mama's been. So it worked great. Strangely enough, and I'm always baffled when I see the size of the leatherbacks, and I go, what do they eat? Do they eat like meat and all this stuff to get big and bulky? They eat jellyfish primarily. So I've seen them even, I was doing a port call up in Halifax, Canada, and I saw jellyfish all over, the huge ones. And lo and behold, leatherbacks up there. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And they can handle the cold a little bit better than some of the other turtles. So proved it to me. Named for their tough leathery skin, it covers a flexible matrix, almost like little octagons or whatever of bones that go together underneath that big rubbery structure. So they're totally different. They are a different species, different type of species than the other sea turtles that have a regular shell or carapace. All right, and then the Hawksbills, another beautiful turtle. You see it out in the Caribbean and stuff all the time. Smaller, and I like to refer to its little beady head as very surgical because its little skull, like again, I'll show you a picture here soon, but it gets in between the corals and all that, and it loves to eat sponges and things, and it can get in there with its little bitty beak, which is pretty neat when you see the skull or you see one up close and see how detailed that little thing is. Feeds almost exclusively on the sponges though. And of course, Hawksbill, it's named for the narrow head and the sharp bird-like beak that it has. Unfortunately, going back to that one, its shell is so pretty also. Historically, it's been, humans have taken it and used it for buttons and all that stuff. And thank God we really cut down on that in the world. And I think it's pretty much frowned upon well enough in the United States that most people wouldn't do that. So, Kemp's Ridley. A small one, adults weigh 85 to 100 pounds, and this one only gets about 2.5 feet long. So it's not a big turtle. I like to call them little grumpy looking turtles, very olive gray, large beak-like head. And that's one of the distinguishing features on this one is that it does have almost like a parrot beak. So when I've seen them before, when I've went in and salvaged them or found them when they're dead and done all my data collection on them, and if it's really decomposed, sometimes they're very tough to tell, but I can usually tell, look at the side of the head and it looks like almost a little parrot beak. So that helps identifying it. And named after Mr. Kemp, the big fisherman there. Real quick relation shows you the different sizes. You can see all the way on the right as you're looking at there, obviously the leatherback, and then going down to that little Kemp's Ridley next to the little human standing there. All right, and there's the skull. I love this slide because it gives you an idea how big the loggerhead is. Now these would all be relational as adult skulls. And you can see that even the leatherback, as big as the leatherback is, a little bit more beady, or else that technical term, a little beadier head, a little smaller head. And then the loggerhead just has that robust, huge head, big jaw. If you open it up and look at that lower jaw, it's like a lot of times the adults will be about 3 inches from the tip back to where that stops. It's so large, so very strong jaw. Definitely wouldn't want to get my hand in there. Greens, again, a good sized turtle. Greens typically bigger than the loggerhead, but look at their little heads, and then the Kemp's Ridley, again, Hawksbills get a little bit bigger than Kemp's, but Kemp's got a little bit bigger head. And then the Hawksbills got that little surgical head there, as I call it, the surgical beak on it and everything. Okay. All right, life cycle of the sea turtle. We're all pretty much familiar with this. The eggs, and I'll go into detail on some subsequent slides here. Mamas come in, lay a lot of eggs. I always say around about 100. We're going to go into that in detail more. And then the hatchlings when they come out, and everybody loves to see hatchlings, and it's pretty rare because in our area, they typically hatch at night. And if you read all the studies and stuff, some of the researchers say that they get in their little frenzy mode where they get together, they team up, and they're getting ready to pop and head to the water. But if it's hot, they'll actually, I don't know how they communicate like that, but they'll tell each other to kind of slow down and let's wait till it gets a little cooler because it's daytime out. So that's what some of the studies say. So I believe it. And they know that, there's a lot of predators out there, which we're going to talk about. But the hatchlings, thousands, hundreds of thousands of them going out every year out of here. Florida does cover 90% of all sea turtle nests in the entire United States. 90% are in Florida. So if you're lucky enough to be walking the beach at night, you see these. Sometimes in the daytime you see them. I'm working the hotline right now, filling in for some other folks. And we had 2 calls this morning. I had 13 calls, I think, yesterday. And we took care of 6 hatchlings yesterday, the team did. And we've taken two this morning that are being worked. So, so we try to do what we can for the hatchlings. Juveniles, that's the next stage. So when they hit 10 centimeters, and I love talking to foreigners because they really pumped up when I say, hey, we're talking centimeters to them, but 10 centimeters, which is about, that big. That's when they hit juvenile stage, or that stage of their life. After that, the subadult hits at 60 centimeters, and then 90 for adults. And after that, we just say they're adults. They're big adults or a small adult or whatever, or really heavy adults sometimes when we're moving them. All right. All right, nesting overview. Most sea turtles return to the same region where they hatch to lay their own eggs. That continues to amaze me when you think, I have GPS. I can get to point A to point B using my GPS half the time. But these things go out and live 20, 25 years, and then the females come back to nest. I don't know how the heck they can do that. They got a heck of a, they say it's related to the magnetic poles and all that stuff, but whatever GPS they use for that is pretty doggone good. And you think, my next thought is, I'm always a thinking guy. I go, okay, wait a second. If they come back 25 years later, can you imagine how much things have changed? Like new seawalls, new condos, more lighting, things like that are being imprinted on their beaches. So it's kind of amazing to see that they're putting up with us that way. The females call up, or they crawl up the beach. They create a body pit, sometimes multiple body pits on their way to do to dig a egg chamber. They dig the egg chamber with their rear flippers, and then they lay their eggs, okay? Has anybody done a night walk with like STPS or any of the other organizations out there? They're really, really cool to do that. And I always tell people, try those out. There's different organizations that do them. Our organization, STPS, opens the window to actually register in May, every year, May 1st. And then June and July are the only 2 months we do that throughout the year. And we can only take you out to sea, and it's a limited set of number of people that can go out every night because of permits and all that. You can only watch a loggerhead, which makes me laugh because I walk down and I say, don't look at the green, but because the greens will be nesting and they're slinging sand everywhere. But pretty cool sight to see if you've never done that. And it's, if you have visitors coming to Florida, I always encourage take them out to do one of those, and they'll love it. My nieces think Uncle Dan's the greatest guy because I've taken him on that. So, all right, on an average, 80 to 120 eggs is what they say on average. This year we had, what was it, Dory, 160 on the down, I think, right? I think we had one nest we evaluated this year of the 160 eggs, which is the biggest nest I've ever been to an evaluation. A nest productivity assessment is the technical term for it, that we did. And I was like, that's a lot of eggs, 160 eggs. So, but typically I always round up, say about 100, 120 is the average. It's a lot of eggs again. They're kind of rubbery. They're like ping pong balls. They're not like chicken eggs because if you dropped a bunch of them in a hole, they'd probably break. So these are a little rubbery when they first come out and everything. Again, they cover the nests using their rear flippers, and they kind of camouflage it. So the greens are notorious. They're big flippers. They'll throw stuff all over. And it's really hard when, Dory's team's out there and she's got us well trained and we're trying to figure out where exactly is the egg clutch. We don't have a sonar or radar or whatever. We just kind of read the tea leaves and the signs and say, okay, it should be right here. And then when you see those little stakes on the beach, ours are white with the yellow signs that say don't touch, it's illegal and all that. Those are typically 3 foot from where we believe the egg clutch is actually. So, and that's what we watch every morning. We're out there walking to see if they've hatched and all that stuff too. Obviously they lay their eggs, they return to the ocean, and then they repeat the process 3 to 6 times. I've seen studies even say 3 to 7 times a year. And then they take a break because it's pretty labor-intensive time for them. So the females will take about a 2 to 3 year break where they're, gorging on food, fattening up again, getting their wits back to their power back to them and all that stuff because it's a lot of work for them to come up and lay those eggs. So a lot of crawling and a lot of weight they're dragging across the beach. Each species has different tracks, and I'm always learning because I've been out there and I think I can identify the tracks pretty good, but then you'll see I saw one that she was heading back out and caught a stick under her flipper. So I was walking up from the water and I go, I don't recognize that track. And it was one that she was pressing the stick in the sand also because it was dragging. It finally dropped out. But you see that, or they have an injured flipper or something like that, and it'll kind of make it look a little different. But going left to right on this slide, the one on the left is a loggerhead. The one in the middle is a green, and the one on the right is a leatherback. And it's kind of tough to tell without some respective size reference on the one on the right, but those are typically, the one I've measured myself is 6 foot wide. So when I walked up on it, it was pretty easy. I didn't say, is that a Kemp Ridley? No, I knew it was a logger or a leatherback as soon as I walked up because it was so huge. But we also look at different things in them for like tail marks, and you'll notice the loggerhead usually doesn't have any tail mark in it. something like that. The Hawksbills, the Kemp's Ridleys are somewhat similar to the loggerheads in that sense, but the greens, you can see in the middle one there, definitely usually has a good sized tail mark in it, something like that. And also one on the right, leatherback, a little bit of a tail mark there too. So they are distinct, and it's really neat to, you get out and start doing this stuff, is learning the, you know, tricks of the trade of how to identify them. I took this slide from FWC, and this is just a roll-up of 2021 with the numbers, with nice little pictures of it too. But you can see 96,000 loggerhead nests, 96,666. So that's a lot of nests. That's statewide, so that's all of Florida. Greens dropped down to 32. Again, our prevalent visitors are the loggerheads. Then the greens, 32,680. And then it drops way down for leatherbacks, 1,390. Again, this is statewide. Kemp's Ridley nest 12 and 0 documented hawksbill nests last year. So we don't get a lot of hawksbills nesting up here, but all right. And there's through the years, you can take a look at that real quick, not to bore you with all the details. Don't think too many negative thoughts when you see, and you're saying, Dan, that looks like it's decreasing through the years. 2019 had 106,000 loggerheads, 2020, 105,000. And then last year, 2021, 96,000. Researchers are like, well, that's just kind of, it's doing its thing. It's not indicating that, oh my God, there's something really bad going on and that we need to look at. But I'll tell you, this year, it's been a great year. So the numbers are going to be over, they're in the six figures easy this year. So I'm going to talk some numbers later, but this, I just want to show you some past statistics. But you can see all of them. Greens, 53,019. And the greens, sometimes they'll say they go up one year and down the next year, up one year and down the next year. So this year is going to be a really good year though. So you're going to see a little spike up, I think, there. And then the leatherbacks, usually just over 1,000. So we had 1,119. 1,600 2020, and then almost 1,400 in 2021. All right, and then I like to break out Brevard County because we're a great county when it comes to sea turtle activity. And you can see here the loggerheads, 27,000, 26,000, 22,000 by itself last year, and usually almost about 100 in leatherbacks there. And then the greens, 25, down to 12,000. So varying by the years. So we get a lot of nests in this county, which is really, really cool to live here. All right, hatchlings. How long does it take for a nest to hatch? Once mama drops her eggs, it's typically about 60 days. And you can get into all kinds of, debates on, well, why earlier and why later and all that. And essentially from everything I know and read and Dory's taught me is that there's a lot of factors. It can be everything, even the temperature a lot of times is a factor. You'll see early nesting. We've had a bunch at 45 days, and then when it's warm, but then you have to look at a lot of variables. It can even be the color of the sand, which, causes differences in the heat of the, what it's absorbing for the nest and all that. The depth of the nest, usually about 2 foot, let's say, down to almost for a loggerhead. Much deeper for I helped this year digging doing an evaluation on a leatherback, and my arm was about as far as I could go down there when me and the other guy digging got to the bottom. So it says as little as 45 days sometimes. The interesting bit, if you probably all heard, but I'll reiterate, the sex of the hatchling, the gender, is dictated basically by the temperature of the egg clutch. And it can vary where you're at in the egg clutch too. But I put the figures on here from a couple of studies I see that are out there and actually show figures. And I'll round up, it's 81.8. So let's say 82 to about 88. So 82 to 88 is the gray area where you don't really know what the sex is going to be. But we have that saying, hot chicks and cool dudes, right? So hot chicks if it's hotter, if it's above 87.8. So if it's above 88 degrees, the majority of them, not all of them, the majority of them are going to be females. And if it's below 82 degrees, the majority, in studies that have been done, are typically males. So the only way I can remember that is cool dudes, hot chicks. So 82 to 88 is that gray area. If it's in the middle there, roll the dice. It could be a female, it could be a male. So, all right. All right, and the hatchlings emerge usually together. There are those late bloomers, I call them, the runts of the litter, sometimes I call them and all that when we're dealing with them. But typically you'll get, 100 plus popping out, and they call it a boil or whatever you want to call it. That's the frenzy time. That's where they got their energy and they're cooperating, because one hatchling 2 foot down the sand cannot get itself out of the nest typically. But 100 of them, as their eggs open up, they collapse or whatever, creating a little, gap in there, and they all work together, and it's cooperation that assists them getting out of the nest at that time. So that's It's really neat when we do evaluations, though. We go in, by law, we got to wait 3 days after the emergence. We flag it. The team that's walking, like this morning, I was walking, there was a brand new emergence that happened last night. So I put a little flag in there. If you see the little wire flags, if you see those on the beach, that's telling you that a nest surveyor went and marked that saying that this has happened. So they've already hatched. We wait 3 days after that, and then we go do evaluations. We actually have evaluation tonight and evaluation Thursday night I'm going to be assisting with. That's when we go in. Sometimes we do find those little, I hate saying runts of the litter. That's what I call them, the late bloomers. Sometimes we find those when we're excavating the nest. We pull everything out, we lay everything out, and we're doing a full evaluation on the remnants of the nest to really figure out how many hatched, how many are dead in the nest, how many pip just broke the shell and maybe died in the shell, coming out of the shell or something like that. That's all stuff that Dory does all the work and puts all that stuff, that information together, that data that goes up the chain to the really smart people to figure out what it means. But that's the thing everybody wants to see. And I've never seen a full bloom of one, but I've seen the remnants. A lot of times when I'm doing nest surveys, we'll come up on it and you'll see, those last ones coming out, which is really cool to see. And then the next amazing bit is then they hit the ocean, and these little guys and gals about this big, they will swim out to the Sargassum Sea or the Sargasso Sea or the Sargassum mats of seaweed you see out there in the Caribbean or way out in the Atlantic. What I'm taught here is it's about 25 mile swim for those little guys and gals to make it out to that Sargassum seaweed, that's a long ways to swim. And usually the studies I've read again, they don't really even eat for about the first week. They will get in the water and they'll power stroke for about a day and a half, where they're stroking for about 1 to 3 minutes even, and then they come up and doggy paddle for 1 to 3 seconds, and then they're power stroking. And they do that over and over until they go like 20, 25 miles. That's a long ways. So pretty amazing that they can do that stuff. And then once they get out to Sargassum, they'll spend the lost years out there, at least a year typically. They'll go out there and they'll float on the Sargassum for different things, food source, protection, camouflage. Even if the water gets cold, the Sargassum gets the solar heat, it heats up a little bit and keeps them a little bit warmer so they don't get cold stunned while they're out there. So different things that the benefits, the symbiotic thing or whatever that's going on out there. Let's see, lost years, okay. Unfortunately, and I'll foot stomp this and say the optimistic researchers say 1 in 1,000 make it to adulthood. Again, adulthood's 20 to 25 years. That's a lot of threat areas they got to go through, not just, getting off the beach, swimming through where the big fish are when they first get off, the first few miles, getting out there and living all the 20 to 25 years surviving, making sure mankind doesn't run over them or kill them or net them and kill them and all that stuff. I've read studies of, I call it the pessimistic researchers, and they say 1 in 10,000. I like to say this, 1 in 1,000 make it to adulthood. Yeah. All right, threats to sea turtles. I've mentioned a lot of them already. Despite for living, well over 100 million years, they're still around. They know how to survive. They lay a lot of eggs, and that's one way they really survive. There's been a lot of introduction of non-native predators, mankind or whatever, the technology we come up, the bigger nets we come up with and all that stuff. We don't want to push these little dinosaurs to the brink of extinction. So a lot of people do a lot of good stuff. Threats, I'm going to talk about some of this stuff. Don't talk it there. Let me talk again, natural predators though. As soon as I've already mentioned, they pop out of the nest, they're making a run for the ocean. I guess before I got down here and lived in Florida, I didn't know ghost crabs were one of those threats to a sea turtle, but I've seen it. I've followed tracks before and noticed it disappeared in a little ghost crab hole, and I actually reached down and pulled just a bunch of sand out, and the hatchling came out, and I was like, wow. So I felt good that day. I had no problem sleeping that night, when I saved a sea turtle's life, little one. And I wished him well, and him or her, and got him or her on his way. But, the ants are a thing now too. Those can actually go all the way down the nest and do. We don't really have that problem here that I'm aware of. Dory hasn't taught me about that yet. I haven't seen it. So I'm going to say I haven't seen the ant problem really. The crabs, ghost crabs, they become a little bit of a problem. And these little guys here, guys and gals, the coyotes, in the last couple of years in our area, STPS only covers a 2-mile swath that's what we do for statistics. We turn in data on 2 miles in Cocoa Beach. UCF covers a huge area. We meet up with them basically at the north tip of Patrick Space Force Base. I have to think about that because I always want to say Air Force. So they meet us basically at Patrick, the tip of their base, and then they go all the way down, essentially down to, mix with some other folks, down all the way down to Sebastian Inlet. That's a huge area they cover. last year we saw a lot of predation where coyotes dug into the nest, pulled out, 8 hatchlings, ate the eggs, and just destroyed the nest and stuff like that, or half the nest or whatever. This year, I don't think it's been as bad, but we're still seeing some coyote predation on the nests up here. And again, we don't do, denial or protection type modes. Certain other areas, they'll lay screens across them and all that, but that's all got to come, us complaining about, saying, hey, here's the observation that we're doing. This is what we're seeing. And then FWC may come down later and say, hey, can you put screens and things on them? But these are public beaches too. So you'll see in the parks, if they have border tape around them, we do that in the parks in our area, like Murchie Park, things like that. We do that basically to keep the public off the ones that we do mark. And we mark every nest that we find in the park. While I'm on the marking bit, a lot of people call the hotline. They're like, hey, I see a nest and it's not marked. I go, we don't mark every nest. We record every nest for statistics. We mark every green nest. We mark every leatherback nest because obviously there's not as many. And you saw there's a lot of loggerhead nests. So we mark we being STPS, we mark every 5th loggerhead nest. That changes as you go south. UCF, I actually talked to them recently because I was confused because people always ask me, and they go, well, what's UCF do for their marking? And I go, well, I've heard this and that, and it varies. They did quote, I can quote them, they said it was 1 in, I'm going to forget now, 1 in 20, 1 in 10. 1 in 10 get marked in Patrick, Space Force Beach area. And then as you go down, it depends on when they're marking them, day, night. It depends on the study that's going on, but it could be every like 50 or 60. 1 in every 50 or 60 loggerhead nests because they have so many. They can't mark everything. You have sticks all over, and you got to carry those sticks and all that. So anyway, that's how we mark them. So if you see the border around it, it's probably in a park in Cocoa Beach area and all that. Okay. Let's see, ghost crabs, seagulls. If you've been to the beach, you've seen this happen in the morning probably. If you did see a hatchling, if you saw them crawling, would be one part, and the next thing, I had somebody on the phone yesterday. She was waving the birds away from the seagull when she was talking to me on the phone. But she was trying to help she called the hotline. I was giving her instruction, all that, of things to do. And I said, first, are there seagulls around? She goes, yes. And I said, please provide overwatch and keep those seagulls away from the sea turtle because they will come and snatch it. And it's part of the food chain thing. They hit the water. It's the big fish, big fast fish. They feed on them too. I've talked to a lot of fishermen out here, and I'm talking about sea turtles. And they said, yeah, I've cleaned fish before and found hatchlings in the bellies and all that stuff. And I go, I get it. And of course, the apex predator out there, when they're adults, and there's a good video. I don't know if anybody saw it lately. It shows I think it was a green that was thwarting an attack by a shark. And the green can maneuver pretty quick. And the shark kept nipping at it. And every time the green's turning and just giving some shell to it, and the shark didn't want any shell. He was going for the flippers. And the green did a fantastic job of keeping the shark away from its flippers. So, but those are the natural predators that are out there, okay? Human impacts, we know netting and stuff like that. Lighting, I can talk all day about lighting. A lady called me yesterday and she was complaining about a street light that's on the west side of A1A. And she's like, can you guys, STPS, can we get that turned off? And I said, well, we don't turn those lights off, but we have a number to the people that you can complain about to the county and make sure they get shielded or make sure they're the proper lighting and all that good stuff. We still got to exist. There's safety factor to have lighting, but we have special lighting and we have the lighting ordinances. And it's nice to know that Brevard County is all over the ball. They're all over that. The cities have jumped on it and everything. And we try to do our best, because the problem is when they hatch, if they see that light, a lot of the hatchlings will go that way. It disorients the females also, the mamas, when they come in and they want to lay eggs, they can get disoriented. The lady yesterday that called me said her neighbor, she was complaining about the light, she said her neighbor counted almost 60 hatchlings in her driveway because of that light. So I'm going to follow up with her, but she said that they were going to call FPL and they were going to do all this. So, but it's part of our passion is to, not be anti-mankind, but just try to do what we can to be safe for mankind, but try to facilitate that we're not disrupting our little ones there. Okay, boat strikes, and I colored it yellow here. #1 cause for stranding among sea turtles. I mean, I could sit there and quote numerous times this year. My team, the Stranding and Salvage team for STPS, has been and we recovered sea turtles that have boat prop strikes or blunt force strikes from vessels that have hit them. Florida, it's the recreational boating capital of the United States. And that's awesome. And I would never say we shouldn't be. And I would never tell somebody you shouldn't go out and ride a boat. But I do tell them, there's certain things you should look out for and do. So The turtles, a lot of times, will come up. They like the surface to breathe, obviously, and that doesn't mix well when a boat's flying through the water, not looking at them. They're slow moving, and if the water's getting cold, they get semi-cold stunned or cold stunned where they just kind of freeze up. They're not operating well. They slow down, kind of like us. When we get cold, I'm not going to go run 3 miles. Usually I get cold and I'm going to sit on the couch or something. And they float when they're sick. If they can't digest, they don't have the energy, it regulates back to just kind of hanging out and not swimming well. All right, how it affects turtles. I threw this slide in because I do like talking about this. If you look, I know it's hard on Zoom land there. If you look at the top portion of the shell that's showing the carapace right here, and you look at that fine line right below it, that is the spine. And most of the time when I see a turtle that's been hit by a prop or a boat, what do you think it cuts? It cuts the shell. And at the very top that may be sticking out of the water, if it was just floating or if it's coming up for a breath of air, still this area is going to be up there and the spine gets severed. And that's not good for the sea turtle. Not good for us, not good for sea turtles. If it can't use its back limbs, it's not going to survive in the ocean. And the one other thing I do want to point out also is if it pierces through that, this next big bag you see right here, that's a lung. You pierce the lung, pierce the spine, turtle's pretty much done. So, they've got all this other goodness in them and all that, but very vulnerable in this area right here when they get hit by a prop. Yeah. That's a photo of one on the 1st of June this year, went and recovered, or actually documented. It was it's a definitive male. So males a lot of time have those big tails hanging out and then I can walk up and go, I think that's a male. That was a pristine looking green, but it's kind of tough to see. It was actually late at night when we recovered or went and documented this one. The prop strikes up towards the head area, but again, June, more boats out, it's summertime, things like that. So I always stress to people, I say, designate a marine animal spotter when they're on the boats. Somebody put your beer down and somebody look for turtles is what I usually tell people. Just one person to pay a little bit more attention of the direction you're heading. That way, if something's popping up, you can kind of tell the guy or gal that's at the helm to slow down or veer off left or right or whatever. Place the boat in neutral, let it exit the area, all that good stuff. Follow the channel markers, follow the posted speeds, and then know what marine life's in the area that you're in. If you're in the lagoons, if you're in a certain area by the edge, don't be buzzing your boat 50 miles by there. There may be a manatee there, and we want to help out the manatees. They had a rough year last year. All right, hooking. I got a call, what was it, yesterday? We had I keep going back to my stranding, so my team. I had one of our team members yesterday pick up a hook, a turtle that was at Jetty Park, and it had, I'm getting it mixed up. No, it was last week, do so many. A little baby or a juvenile green, a little bit over a foot long. It had, once it got to the zoo and they x-rayed it, we knew there were 2 hooks in its mouth and its beak. Gets to the zoo, they found 9 hooks in it, 5 full hooks and 4 pieces of hooks that were inside the GI tract and all that stuff. The zoo, again, wonderful folks out there doing great stuff, way smarter than I am. They got 8 of the hooks out, and the 1 partial hook was still going through the GI tract when I talked to somebody late last night. So, a lot of people hook them out there at Jetty. I've been out there many a times, and we do tell them, it's good that a lot of times they'll call us and we'll say, hey, this is what we need to do. Let's get treatment and all that stuff. And the sad part of the story was a little boy last week was the one that hooked it. And when the stranding individual got there, he was in tears. And she did a good job of saying, hey, you hooked it, but it's got another hook in it, and we're going to go take it to the zoo and let people take care of it. So don't cry too much because you may help this turtle. And he did, essentially. So I think she's called him back and told the dad all that passed to him. So it's kind of good. We like to follow up like that, All right. But it's the fishing line, the hooks, all that stuff. If you see fishing line, 2 weeks ago, I was diving in the Caribbean. And I looked over and they were watching me, and I was winding up 50 foot of string on the bottom of the ocean, which is full of hooks and stuff. And I got back and I gave it to the guy that I was with, He was like, what are you doing? I said, here, please throw this away, because I like sea turtles and I don't want any other animals or sea turtles to, get caught up in this or ingest it. So let's always do that stuff. Commercial fishery bycatch. We just had one of those in this last week also. Somebody was a shrimp trawler off the coast here, about 30 miles. They caught it was the size of a hatchling, but we're going to call it a post hatchling, green sea turtle. It drowned in the net, didn't get through the turtle excluder device. I mean, it's kind of small anyway, but it got caught up in the net. Brought it back. a NOAA observer was on. She documented it all, but we actually transported it. We salvaged it because FWC wants to, all the studies they do with it and all that, or whatever documentation they use. And it's not to chastise people. We want people to go catch shrimp and all that because people like eating shrimp and all that. But things like the turtle extruder devices, those would have never came into existence if people weren't saying, hey, is there a better way to do this? Can we help save sea turtles by making heads or turtle excluder devices and have those become a regulation on the net? You know, I've never actually talked to a fisherman and say, how does that really work? Do you like those or do you not like those? But someday I'll do that. But it's nice to see things that when people that have that conservation mindset, they want wild animals to succeed and live, you know, thrive. Things like that are getting out there and becoming part of life. Commercial fishery bycatch, how you can help. What I'm doing here, I'm also throwing in the how you can help type stuff. You didn't catch that, but sustaining or support the fisheries that use sustainable practices. There's actually websites out there. You can actually go in there and figure out where to get your tuna or whatever and all that, but lots of good stuff to read like that. All right, debris and plastics. Plastics drive me crazy when I go to the beach. I think I'm OCDing about plastics nowadays because when we walk, Dory's teams, we go out, we do nest surveys. Even this morning, we had 2 big bags of trash and most of it was plastic. Everything from a gallon jug. I found a pool cue stick case this morning. I don't know how that ends up on the beach washed up, but you know, we pick all that stuff up while we're doing our nest surveys just as a favor. And plastics are all over. I mean, the micro, the little bitty pieces, all the stuff that's breaking down, it's in the ocean. You know, you can debate that all day. People say that the big patches out there. Some people say it's not that bad, but I can tell you that a lot of the turtles that do wash up here, when they get to the zoo, they have a lot of plastic in them. And they get so much plastic in them, they can't digest. And what happens? I know if I can't digest, I'm not feeling well, or I can't eat, I can't get the energy I need, can't get off the couch. They do the same thing, except they're not on the couch. They just float around out there, and then they get, you know, algae growing on them, or they get hit by a boat because it's floating and they can't get out of the way or anything. Or, you know, the health just kind of spirals down. And that's what a lot of plastics do. The papilla that's in this one here is actually a, if you look on the bottom right of the screen, those little papillas, if you've ever seen the inside, and I saw a mock-up when I was in Canada one time, and they had a skull. It was a mock-up, but it had all the papilla. I don't know how they preserved it. And it was kind of one of those things where you could reach in and go, wow. You know, it looked like, I thought it was like that Predator movie from the 80s or whatever, when it opens up. That's what they look like. But they do that because, remember, they live on jellyfish. And that's the things that keep the jellyfish in their throat and going that way. But what do you think also catches in there that looks kind of like a jellyfish? Is one of those crazy trash bags from a grocery store, right? Plastic bags. And those things will grab them. There's the sea turtles, not just leatherbacks, but other sea turtles will think it's some kind of a jellyfish or an animal. And they'll ingest it. And it gets, I know if I ate it, I don't know what would happen if I ate one, but I don't think it would be good either. So it's bad effects, same things. And they get entangled in plastics and debris and stuff like that too. So always cut back, you know, I like the 4 R's they have here is refuse, you know, take your own bags in, all that stuff, reuse, reduce usage, and then recycle. And join for cleanups. STPS does that. I'm going to talk about that later. Other threats, oil spills, pollution, all that other things that are out there. Nesting interference, you know, a lot of the stuff people leave, and sometimes we'll see the big covers that are sitting out there with their frames. People leave them out there overnight and see mamas crawl up. You see the tracks will bump into them or spook, and then they're like, yep, nope, I'm not going to lay eggs tonight, and they go back to the sea. We call those false crawls when that happens. We do document all those too. The thing I can't stand though is, and I guess a lot of people don't realize what they're doing, they dig deep holes. And I don't know what this TikTok challenge is that's going on this year about digging holes on beaches, you know, but we feel a lot, you know, and I'm really working the adductor muscles, I think, a lot when I'm out there, you know, trying to scoop it in there with my legs and all there, my feet. But I think if we got more word out there and show the hatchlings that when you dig a hole and you don't fill it in, those hatchlings, if they pop out at night and they make the run for the ocean, they fall in there, and a lot of times they can't get back out. You know, we've had, what was it, one of my stranders about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, she found, I think it was almost 40 hatchlings that were in a hole. You know, luckily we got them, took care of them, and I think almost all of them, but one maybe didn't make it, so that was good. But you know, if somebody wouldn't have reported that to the hotline, and no telling what would have happened. What if a coyote would have came up and said, the buffet time or something, you know? So always stress to people, and I'm not a police officer, I'm not an enforcer, but when I'm walking on the beach, I commonly will go up to somebody when they're digging and say, hey, you know, here's a card about the species, and here's information about STPS, but can I suggest when you get done playing today, fill that hole back in so little hatchlings don't get stuck and die. you know, try to bolster up their support for sea turtles. Who doesn't love sea turtles? Keeping them dark. Artificial lighting, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Our lights out policy around here is May 1st to October 31st. The nesting has slowed down. Let's see how it affects turtles. I mentioned it earlier. Disorients them, bottom line. You know, the hatchlings, from the hatchlings all the way to the mamas, can be disoriented. Ends up where it's not a good event. I mean, we had one last year. Mama got out on A1A, got struck by a car. I think it was about 5:30 it was really early, about 5 in the morning. And, you know, if there was, the lights weren't there, you were disorienting her or distracting her, that probably would have never happened. So, and she died and she was full of eggs too. So keep the beaches dark. The other thing is no flashlights. And people will say, well, my flashlight's red. And I go, if I shine my red flashlight in your eye, you can see it, you know. Just like humans though, it doesn't, you know, it's a longer wavelength light. So it doesn't disrupt our night vision as much, but they can still see it. It can still spook them, it can scare them, all that stuff. So I tell people no lights. I had a lady 2 days ago just sent me a video and she's like, hey, I saw these hatchlings on the beach. And it was after a hotline call, which I was like, hey, it's great you're reporting hatchlings. But she goes, hey, I have a video, I'll send you. She sends me the video. And she had a regular big flat white flashlight. She was shining it on a whole nest as they were hatching, all over, just going back and forth. And again, I try to be cordial. And I know people mean well. I always say that. I know people want to help the sea turtles. And she thought she was like, I don't know, leading them like the Pied Piper with her light or something. And I told her, I said, you know, what you did is just so illegal. You know, I actually put that in a text back to her. And she's like, really? And I told her, yes. And let me send you some information. She was Googling. She texted back and said, oh, my word. I Googled it and I see what you're talking about now. I said, great. I can sleep again good tonight. Okay. So, all right. Development, mentioned a little bit earlier, you know, the coastal development, the renourishment on the beaches and all that can have ill effects on the sea turtles. So we look at that stuff. Illegal harvest. Luckily, we don't have too much of this in the United States. There's still countries in the world that, again, maybe this is how they make their living, by eating or selling or whatever with sea turtles. You know, there's a lot of great advocates in the world that are trying to really stand up and make sure that doesn't happen all the time. Another stranding story last year, we had 2 individuals in the middle of the night at Port Canaveral that netted a little juvenile green, and they threw it in their trunk. And I think they were going to go home to have turtle soup. And luckily, we have the sheriff's department is awesome up there. They get their own guys and gals dispatched up there. And these 2 individuals did not even make it off the port area. They got arrested before they even left the port, which I was like, another 2 thumbs up, Sheriff Ivy. And I was contacted because they were talking to us about doing the release of that one, but the FWC-LE, law enforcement, they actually released it. And so anyway, law enforcement doing great things. I don't think anybody in here would support anybody taking turtles to eat or doing any nefarious stuff with the hatchlings or eggs and stuff like that too. We have 2 collection stations that I manage also in the county. And we can't, FWC does not let us publicize those. We can't put the locations in social media or anything like that. Common knowledge, once people drop, you know, if they drop one off there, they call our hotline, we say, this is where a collection station is. Please, can you take this? I don't tell them because I don't want them calling Dan Newland if they have an accident or anything. I say, please drop it off at one of our collection stations, and we have a stranding individual go recover them and stuff and do what we need to with them to help them on their way. But if we publicize that, the thought is maybe some of the nefarious people out there would go and collect and take the hatchlings for whatever purpose. So that's why you don't see those advertised much. All right. Talked a lot about sea turtles. I love talking sea turtles. I want to talk a little bit about STPS, the Sea Turtle Preservation Society. It's been around since the 80s, actually. Became a nonprofit in the 90s. We got more than 1,000 members, and we have certain volunteers within that membership that do things like what I'm doing, do things like Dory's doing. You know, leading permits. We have board members. We have monthly events. We just had an event, was it last Thursday, where we had a speaker from the Marine Turtle Research Group at UCF, really smart people. She came in and gave us a really good presentation about, you know, the markers, things that they look for, trying to figure out FT tumors, fibropapillomatosis. There'll be a spelling test on that later. But, you know, what they're looking at to determine why sea turtles, especially the greens usually, get FT tumors and stuff. But I like the organization. It's really nice. It lets you talk to people, be around people, learn from other people, and interact and do things for sea turtles. Don't pay attention to this guy on the left there, but education, I don't do a lot of education for the organization. I do like to talk, and they know that, but we set up booths, been out to colleges and set up tables, talk to them out there, different things. We come to events like this, talk sea turtles. We even have a couple presents in the county. I'm going to talk a little bit later, but even that little sea turtle down there on the right, that's a green skeleton. We got that. That's a real one. It's hanging up at our port kiosk. So if you're ever at the port, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but drop in there when it's open. It's only open usually 2 days a week, but check out our stuff we've got there. A little bit of education. Of course, we got merchandise. We're a nonprofit, so any money made goes to helping sea turtles thrive. It helps our rescue equipment. We have a rescue vehicle, different things like that. All right, the night walks. I talked about that earlier. A little recap from this year, though. In 2022, we had 38 walks that were ran by our permit holder, Craig, that does that. June and July, only 2 months a year. And let's see, the guests that went out on those walks, they successfully witnessed the nesting loggerhead on 30 of the 38 walks. So that's a pretty good percentage. You know, we don't control them. So unfortunately, people can show up. They get a class about sea turtles. We take them out. Sometimes the mamas don't cooperate with us. Okay. That figures up to about 79% success rate. It wasn't too bad this year. All right, beach cleanups. We got 2 locations in the county that we actually clean up every first Saturday after the first Thursday, right? We do cleanups at Cherry Downs and Coconut Point. And it's just, you know, our organization out there and helping people get involved with that stuff. Nest surveying, I know I've talked a lot about nest surveying. It's a really neat thing and I love doing out here. These are 2 photos of people doing the evaluations, starting the evaluations where we dig in, we lay everything out, we count everything, what happened, you know, how many open eggs were there, how many got out of the nest, how many died that are still in the nest and all that. So, all right, some totals last year, just STPS. So in our little 2-mile swath is always referred to it. It's Dory's area, right? 295 loggerhead nests recorded. And again, we mark every 5th nest. We didn't mark 295 loggerhead nests. Every 5th one gets marked, unless it's in the parked area. 7 greens and only 2 leatherbacks. Okay, that's our numbers from last year. That resulted in more than 60 nest evaluations. And bottom line, the nest productivity assessments indicated there was over almost 5,100 hatchlings that emerged from those nests. 5,100 in our little 2-mile swath, which is kind of cool. All right, totals so far this year, it's been, again, a pretty good year. Look at last year, 295, 100 more than that. So 396 loggerhead nests as of the 1st of this month in our area. STPS's little 2-mile area. 6 greens, so we're down 1, and then 2 leatherbacks. So we tied last year, but the loggerheads are having a heck of a year this year. So, all right, and I like to throw a little bit about Archie Carr. Hopefully everybody's familiar with Archie Carr National Wildlife Refuge down here that goes down and goes south of our border, I think a little. This is the numbers as of the 25th of last month. They have a lot of nests down there. So almost 18,000 loggerhead nests, coming up on 11,000 greens, 101 leatherbacks, 1 Kemp's Ridley, cool. And I got this from the Friends of the Car. They post this on Facebook. But if you go right to Marine Turtle Research Group, UCF, what they put out is an addition I'm going to add on there because they don't cover the whole Archie Carr area. So their numbers are a little lower than that. But they did verify this year they had a nesting female that came back that they've encountered before, and it was a hybrid. So it was a loggerhead splash that bred with a hawksbill. So a loggerhead hawksbill hybrid mama that came back and laid eggs again in their area that they documented. They were able to document it this year. It's pretty cool. All right, there's some strange guy there, but he's out doing a stranding and salvage. Again, you know, we respond to emergency calls for sick, injured, dead sea turtles in the area. The injured ones, the sick ones, we transport out to the zoo typically. I'd say 99% go to the zoo out here. The zoo will take them with FT tumors. We also work with like SeaWorld Rescue. Strange enough, SeaWorld Rescue will not take them with tumors. You know, big facility, but they got to keep it pure out there. We primarily though, we're there to document. You know, it's kind of I'd say it's a sidebar thing that we are lucky enough that we get to assist wounded ones and injured and all that, or you know, sick ones. But we document. Our documentation digitally now goes into a database that goes in with 18 other states in the United States, of course, East Coast kind of states primarily. And that leads to again, I say the really smart people, they get to use our data and they start monitoring the mortality rates, the mortality factors, you know, how many boat strikes are there. It allows them to have some data and information that they can, you know, they can use that for any battles they may wage or any research to figure out how we can, you know, what's going on with turtles, what needs attention and things like that. What else? I got a little note on there, the turtle excluder devices. Again, this data is something that, because we have to say if it was netted and all that stuff, it goes in the big database and allows them to start pushing things like, hey, we want to come up with TEDs and things like that for the nest. I also threw in a slide here. This gives you a snapshot of time. You can see the different vectors going, or the lines going across there. The dotted, the highest line actually is the 10-year average for Brevard County stranding activities. The dashed is the 5-year, and then the dotted on the line, which is actually the lowest line, and the lines going across there, that's this year actually. It's actually a little low this year, which low would, it's not Dan's being lazy. It's, you know, I think the turtles are doing better, even though we may have more turtles, less turtles, whatever, but the turtles aren't ending up dead or injured in our county as much so far this year when you look at it. My benchmark right there, or my stopping point right there was 1 September. I counted 149 in Brevard County, and the 5-year average is 171. So yeah, what, 22, public math, 22 less than normal right now. So that's actually pretty good, I think. I keep meticulous records of what the stranders do, the efforts that we're doing and all that. So I like to put them in my little spreadsheet that auto-populates my little charts and all that good stuff. You can see 2021, we had a total, our organization had a total of 278 events that we reacted to. Our 24 people on the permit, plus myself, 25. We conducted 278 events. 173 of those post-hatchling and older. So those are the normal ones. Those are the ones that go in the sea turtle stranding and stranding and salvage network database. I spoke that, STPS, Sea Turtle Stranding and Salvage Network database. They don't track hatchling activity though. I like to track hatchling activity. So these numbers, when you see up here, this says 105 hatchling events. That's not 105 hatchlings. That's a person got off their couch, went, took care of hatchlings, disposition's done, boom, they go home. It could have been 1 hatchling, it could have been 50 hatchlings. So, you know, when you look at the numbers, they're way higher than those event numbers. But as you can see with the lines, the normal events are the green lines here, and it has each month what we do. And then what I do is I do a cumulative number, which is the blue line. That includes hatchling numbers in there. So you can see, let's see, August last year, 50 cumulative, which let's see, going to 10, and so there were 40 hatchling events last year for August. Look at this month, we had some ties here. So July, 111 cumulative, August, 111. It's been a pretty good year for nests. So I think people are learning, you know, people are learning our hotline number and what we do. 2 is there's more turtle nests, there's more loggerhead nests here. So we're getting more hatchling activity. The bottom line, it's doubled. You know, cumulative 50 last year, 111 tied for both, what was it, July and August right there. So it's been pretty busy summer for the stranders on the team here. 209 hatchling events by itself so far this year. Pretty active. Breaking these out though, that figure of 111, I didn't want to throw in the numbers. I'm a stats kind of guy, I like doing this. So 97 events were hatching related last month. That equated to, there's 97 events for 203 hatchlings that we actually assisted. And we got about a 60% or 68% live hatchling and release rate. Can't even talk. 130, so of those 203 hatchlings we helped, 138 of them were released. We had 56 that died. We had 9 hatchlings that ended up just going to the STHC, the Sea Turtle Healing Center at the zoo, due to injuries and stuff. A lot of times if they've got scratches on them, they can survive with a scratch and stuff. If they are missing a limb, they've got severe issues going on, injuries, they go to the zoo and get the help out there and see if they can do anything for them. All right. For the regular turtles, which is all, when I say regular, that's post-hatchling and older. So post-hatchling being 10 centimeters or older, bigger. 14 events so far this year, 9 lives and 5 deceased. Again, the lives, all 9 of those, I believe, went to the zoo for care. The 5 deceased, we do the record tracking, you know, take all the stats, the links. We look for FP tumors, we look for all kinds of things, and we document all that. All right, we have a transport permit. I'm told that we are the only organization in Florida that actually has a pure just transport permit, which I think is pretty cool too. It shows that, you know, this county is pretty active on sea turtles, right? So our transporters are authorized, they can move a turtle legally from one rehabilitation facility to another one. So as an example, if it was going from the zoo here to SeaWorld, we have a couple dozen people practically that we can on call, and we can send a little notification out saying, hey, we got one, it's hot, we got to move this one now. And somebody raises their hand. We're all volunteers. We don't get paid for this either. So, you know, somebody comes back and goes to the hotline monitor and says, hey, I can take it. We take them down to Boca Raton down there, to the nature center down there. It's a good haul, but we take some down there for release, like leatherback hatchlings, things like that. So it's another thing that we do. This is a map showing the rehabilitation facilities in Florida. And you can see Brevard County on the far right there, obviously. And it's listed as a PAP facility, so FP tumor. So some places will take FP turtles and some won't. So you can see in the center there, obviously Orlando area, SeaWorld and such, they don't take FP. So our zoo stays pretty busy. Shannon Gans, the manager out there for the Sea Turtle Healing Center, her and Jess and crew out there, Stephanie, they do a fantastic job. So, all right, STRP falls, it's kind of hard to explain. So it's a letter of consent by FWC that falls under my permit, being permit number 169. And essentially, and I'm a military guy by background, so I like to refer to this group as the reserves, right? So these are the people in reserves until a cold stun or a big washback session's going on where we're seeing, say, hundreds of post-hatchlings being washed back. They're stuck in the sargassum seaweed on the beach and all that. We'll call a STRP event, activate the masses here. And right now, I can have up to 150 people on this letter of consent. Trained this year, we've got 121 this year. Every year that expires December 31st. So every year, those people have to be trained up again every single year. And I got to by name, go up to FWC, and they call us a STRP group. So it's pretty neat. So we got a lot of people that are interested, 121 right now in waiting. So if the turtles have an issue like that, and they're being washed up, we call a STRP event, they're going to help out. Fundraising events. So if you're not ready, if you haven't signed up yet, this Saturday is our turtle crawl. That's one of our biggest money makers for our organization. It's down there at Dance Park in the Atlantic. Even if you can't run 5K, maybe you can walk 5K. So give it a try. Zoomland, all those people out there. What it does, it allows us, you know, to use that money to help the sea turtles. And it's not just our organization. Sea Turtle Healing Center that I mentioned already, Shannon and crew out there, we, the STPS, helped that place open in 2014. You know, I really think if STPS wasn't around, that level of a Sea Turtle Healing Center would not exist out there. But every year we give them money too. We hand them a check, sometimes like a $20,000 check, stuff like that, to help them out, to do good stuff for the sea turtles. I mentioned it earlier, the Marine Turtle Research Group at UCF. They do great work down there, great studies. They got fantastic students and all that stuff, interns or whatever we call those people that are smart and getting their bigger degrees. Dean Bagley, Dr. Bagley there, she also does the transmitters for the turtles. Those things cost $5,000 a piece for a transmitter. We bought 2 of them for them this year, STPS did. And we can't do that without donations and people going out and doing the turtle crawl and stuff like that. So, but every year, as far as I know, Dory can, we've donated transmitters to UCF. I don't know if any other organization does that. But our presence, we have that, the southerly presence in the county, which is not all the way, but down in the Atlantic, we have the Sea Turtle Preservation office or headquarters or learning center or whatever you want to call it down there. We call it the Turtle House, is usually what the members call it. That little bitty picture on the right-hand side, that's our newer, I think it's been there about 3.5 years or so now, coming up on 4. That's our turtle nest. And I call it the kiosk up at the port. And if you know where Grills is and you walk out of Grills and take immediate left, going over to the Royal Caribbean Terminal 1, it's right there outside of Grills to the left right there. But that one's only open, the little kiosk, run by volunteers again, Saturdays and Sundays, 9:30 to 3:30. Sometimes I'll go over there and with other volunteers, we'll pop it open on a Tuesday. It's open right now for Royal Caribbean when they do a regular port call, because we get a lot of traffic in there. And there's nothing better than telling all these people from all over New York and Jersey, even though I know half the people in Florida are from New York and Jersey, I think, but the people that come right from the ship from New York and Jersey and all those places way up north, I love to tell them about how much sea turtle activity we have in Brevard County. And I mentioned Brevard County specifically, and I love telling them about the good stuff STPS does to help the sea turtles. So. All right, how to keep in touch with STPS, SeaTurtleSpaceCoast.org is our website. We got all kinds of good info on there. That's where you go. You can find the link to sign up for the turtle walk, turtle crawls mentioned on there, Facebook, Instagram, all those other things out there. All right, and lastly, I want to, the center of the slide right there, that hotline number, please, if you don't have that in your cell phone, your mobile phone, please put that in there. And don't put Turtle 911, please put Sea Turtle 911. I tell everybody that. It's Sea Turtle 911, and that's that goes to our hotline monitor. If you call that, you'll basically leave a voicemail. You don't get somebody live right off the bat. You leave a voicemail, say where you're at, who you are, all that good stuff, and the issue you got. And then we'll have somebody usually call you back in a couple minutes and then figure out what we can do to help the sea turtle. All right. Outside of Brevard County, call FWC. And I'm kind of grinning about that because 2 nights ago, a lady just called and she goes, I'm in Myrtle Beach. And I go, isn't that like one of the Carolinas or something? She goes, yes. And she goes, I got a hatchling. And I go, I can't help you. I said, I do Brevard County. That's way down south of where you're at. So we do get calls. We get calls from Panama and Panama Beach and stuff like that. So we usually give them FWC's number if they're in state. But it's nice to know that our number's out there on Google and people are finding our hotline number. But it is, Brevard County is what we do. So, all right. And the license plate grant. The grants provide a way we can write up a little request to get money from the grant. Now we can get grants from things like this. So if you got one of these tags, thank you for donating. It goes to a lot of different causes to help sea turtles in the state, you know, and we're just one of those little entities that reaches out to the pot occasionally and says, hey, we need a rescue vehicle. Can we get a couple thousand or something from you? And they help out. You know, the good people lay their books out and say, okay, we got all these people asking for money, grants. We got this much in from the tags. And the cool thing is this is one of the most popular tags selling for DMV in the state. I don't know who it is right now, UCF or somebody I think has a lead, but I think last year we were like second or third in the roll-up of selling, not we, but sea turtle tags. So I thought that was pretty cool. All right, and Archie Carr, that famous, you know, UCF alumni, I think there, that, you know, conservationist for sea turtles. Said for most of the wild things on the earth, the future must depend on the conscience of mankind. So it's always good to leave with a little quote. Again, thanks for listening to me. I know I get long-winded. I talk fast. Hopefully I didn't go too fast. And questions? Good? Yeah, I talked about.
All right, so I'm going to start you off with a couple of the Q&As, and then I'm going to come around to everybody in the audience. If you have your questions written down on your piece of paper, go ahead and get them ready. Come around in a second. So first question, this is a good one. Hello, my ultimate major is going to be marine biology and would like to be more involved with internship and research opportunities. Do you have any opportunities at STPS?
Internship, it would not differ from, I'd say, the ordinary other member that's in STPS. And I do always encourage people to join STPS. The key is, you know, the monthly socials we have, you can join those, you can meet really experienced people, such as looking over at Dory over here, Roger, two of the alumni of the organization have been around a long time. And since I got on board, you know, and I like to talk, but I love to listen too. They always say 2 ears and 1 mouth, you got to shut up sometimes, but it's people like that within the organization, you glean a lot of information and knowledge from the resident people that are in the organization. For like regular paid positions, no, don't think about that. The other things would be if you got on a permit. It's not as easy as joining the organization and stepping right on a permit. The permits, the FWC runs the permits. They are limited. All our permits really only allow 24 people per permit. But I always talk with Dory and say, we always got to look for new blood on our permits, you know, and it's like some people either get burned out, you know, they get things happen in life, they need to move on. So we're always recruiting and then retaining the people that we have on our permits. So I would say for marine biologists, I think trying to step into the organization, learn from other people. There's a lot of learning opportunities, classes, seminars, training events that you are privy to. We've got one coming up in December down in Marathon. And, you know, being part of the organization opens those doors to do that. So I would encourage anybody, if a lot of people I talk to, again, not a marine biologist, but I've met a lot of marine biologists, even with PhDs within our organization. So I always find it very interesting. I learn from them. I hope sometimes I learn a couple things from me. So hopefully that helps.
We have Mrs. Carr's class watching right now, and she says one of my students would like to know if algae hurts the turtles, and also wants to know approximately how many turtles are in the whole world.
Let me answer the second one first. I have no idea. Roger, Dory, can you back me up on that one? How many turtles in the whole wide world? There's a lot. I mean, millions and millions. I mean, you look at how many eggs there are, and of course we all know, let's just say 1 in 1,000 make it to adulthood. That's a lot fighting the way through those years. I really couldn't answer that. I've never seen that in any studies or estimates and guesstimates and all that stuff. The algae though, remember, greens, they like to eat algae. That's why we see a lot of juvenile greens around our port up here at Port Canaveral, around docks, pilings and things like that, around the rocky areas. They'll actually sit there and scrape that stuff with their little beaks and stuff. They'll scrape that, they'll consume that, just like sea grasses. We refer to them as sea, lawnmowers of the sea, because they're the only turtle that has a serrated little beak or jaw, and they can motor through the seagrass pretty good. But the algae, a lot of people ask me that when I'm doing trainings. They'll see a sea turtle that has barnacles all over its back. They'll see a sea turtle that has a lot of algae. We call it hair algae also, that actually looks like green hair. And it's not always a bad thing. It's just sometimes what's been portrayed to me is sometimes if they're ill, they're not operating 100%, not fully filling all their physical abilities or, you know, aptitudes and stuff, that they're gonna float a little bit more, and maybe they're just floating, because some of them do go down. They'll go below ledges, rock ledges, out whatever coral ledges, and they'll kind of scrape their back like that. I've been on dives in Hawaii where I've seen, and there was a dive station or a dive location. They actually called it the car wash, I think they called it. And turtles would come down in tandem, huge greens, and land, and they'd have algae on them and stuff. And the little cleaner fish would just clean them for like, you know, 10, 15 minutes. And my wife and I were amazed. We spent the whole dive just sitting there breathing sucking our air like crazy, as we were just like, we couldn't believe it, because 2 would come in, they'd land, get clean, they'd leave, 2 more would come in. Sometimes I'd get out of the way because I'd see the shadow coming down on me, and they would land in tandem. And I was like, I can't believe they do this. But they would clean the algae off, and they'd clean the insects, the parasites off of them too. But just seeing algae on a sea turtle is not always a bad. I mean, it doesn't mean they're sick. It doesn't mean they're dying. Sometimes they survive like that. I mentioned the barnacles. A lot of people, like I said, barnacles isn't always a sign either. Sometimes it's a sign that there's something going on. If it's just covered, inundated with barnacles, you're growing on the back, and barnacles are alive. So when I pick them up and they start doing their little pinchy thing coming out at me, I don't like that. But it's normal to see some barnacles on sea turtles, you know, and greens have such beautiful carapaces. You don't like seeing that, but just seeing that does not mean it's sick. You know, there's a lot of times if they get inundated with too many barnacles, it can cause drag as they go through the water and stuff. But usually they'll do their little scraping thing, and they can survive. I've seen very healthy sea turtles that have tons of barnacles on them, but I've also seen dead ones that have tons and tons of barnacles. But I've been told that it's not always a factor to say is it healthy or not by the amount of barnacles or algae. Good.
All right. Are hybrid turtle species a common occurrence? Do their mating habits or nesting habits differ from other sea turtles?
Good question. Not an authoritarian expert on this, but it's very uncommon, very, very uncommon. There are those, just like in humans, I like to look at humans and say, you know, do we have a lot of, and I'll use the term albinos, you know, we have, and I know I'm going to butcher the word, Lucific turtles, which I recovered a Lucific hatchling, which was very, very white. And I was like, that's strange, but it was Lucific. It wasn't albino though, because it had black eyes. If it had pink eyes, it would be classified as an albino. It's just pigment free almost. It's a Lucific turtle. And, but that's an example of the oddities that we do see. And you'll see them sometimes when we try to identify. If it's a clean turtle, the carapace, the shell is very clean. The first thing a lot of times I'll look at is I'll count the scutes. That's the little sections of shell on the back of the carapace. You know, greens will have 4 scutes, lateral on the sides. Another turtle like loggerheads will have 5 on each side typically. Now I've also recovered loggerheads that had 6 on one side, 5 on one side. So there's oddities, just like humans. We don't all look exactly the same. So, but hybrids, to answer your question though, hybrids are not common, but it does happen, you know, and I've seen different pictures. Marine Turtle Research Group's got some good stuff out there. Dr. Mansfield, I follow her on Twitter, and she puts stuff out there a lot, and I'll collect it and I use it in classes, even with my stranders and stuff, saying, hey, you know, they're not all the same, you know, just because if you're sitting there looking at the suits, you may get confused. And I know in the STRP class this year, I used a very recent picture. I think it was like only a week old or so. It actually had a hybrid type turtle, and there was they were swirl suits on the back. I mean, it looked really strange, but that's probably the best I can answer that. Not real common, but it happens in nature. So.
All right. Can you explain the mating cycle? When and where do the turtles mate? When do the males come in to mate? If they do.
So the mating cycle. First off, I'll say in our area, the males don't come on the beach. If the males are coming on the beach, there's an issue typically with them. Now this differs. You go to Hawaii, you'll see huge greens and they just bask in the sun. And I've been there on the north shore of Oahu, and I was like, wow, look at these big greens, you know, it's really cool. You don't see that here. And it's a regional area that's different. And like I tell people it's different, like going to New York and going to Louisiana. People act a little differently sometimes. I say turtles is kind of the same way. But here, if a male's on the beach, like the one picture you saw with the male in the summer, it was a boat strike, it was deceased. If they're really sick, sometimes they'll end up on the beach. A normal healthy male will typically not be on the beach here, okay? Turn the page, females. It's same for females except when they're nesting. And we are in the nesting season right now. We're on the backside of it right now. Throwing figures out. Ours was really slowed down. The last nest in our area, STPS is the little area that Dory controls, was the 18th of last month. And since then, we've only had a few false crawls. I was out there doing nest visits this morning. We had one emergence where last night they popped up and made their way to the ocean. And, but it's really slowing down. So it goes till about October. You know, we may see some more nests in September. I don't know, maybe in October, but it's very rare. Again, they're female turtles. They're going to nest when they feel like it. But, you know, we've had nests out here in, I think, January and December. Very, very rare. Typically, it's, you know, during the typical months. You really start seeing them kind of in March, and then up to August, September is the typical that I'm familiar with in Brevard County. What they do, though, is they obviously mate right off the shore, and as in the slide, multiple times in a year. And it's kind of funny that the hotline gets calls and people will be like, yeah, I'm watching this turtle and it's just floating out there and it's not doing well. And it's been floating right there for an hour. And sometimes I'm like, it's just doing turtle stuff. Leave it alone. So there was somebody, what day was it? It was Mother's Day or something. I don't know. And I said, I think it's being a mother today. Just let it be out in the ocean. It's fine. So, but they'll do their thing out there. They do their mating. I think it's like a couple weeks later, she'll come in, lay eggs, and then she can go back, mate. And it's a pretty short time. They can actually reproduce eggs pretty quick. So hopefully that answers that.
First, check on the nest to have any contact with the hatchlings.
Do the moms have contact with the hatchlings or check on the nest? They do not. They do not. No, once they lay the eggs, they go back to the ocean, they're done. So they're all on their own. There's no reemergence, there's no reunions or anything. Once the hatchlings pop out in the ocean, they go do their own thing. And some of the species are very, you know, which ones are the leatherbacks? They kind of like to be on their own, you know. So some of them, even when they're in rehabilitation, they have to be in separate containers because they get a little cantankerous. They like to be by themselves. So, but yeah, that's just the nature of sea turtles is moms lay the eggs and move on. So.
Right. My question is related to sea turtles' modified flippers. Does it only allow them to survive in the water, or can it help them move through sand on beaches?
All right. What's the function of their flippers? They're obviously designed through evolution and all that good stuff, you know, to work very well in the water. And they're pretty fast in water. I mean, I've been out to was it Jetty Park area and grills back behind their docks and tried to net them when people are like calling in, they're like, oh, there's a sea turtle. It's got line around its neck and everything. And can you help it? And we go out there and I'll spend an hour and a half and I can't catch it, with a normal smaller net instead of a huge thing out there. So they're pretty fast. So they are designed obviously for the water. Amazingly, they can use them when the mamas come up to lay eggs. They will use them. Each species are a little different. You got the species that kind of do, as I say, the left, right, which is like a loggerhead, and it crawls left flipper, right flipper, and they push their way up that way. I mean, obviously they can't run or anything. They meander up that way. The greens kind of do the breaststroke. So they go, when you look at their tracks, they're symmetrical. Left and right kind of go together like that. I don't know if I'm demonstrating well, but that's how they work. But yeah, they're really designed for water. They're not really land feet or anything. So not like a tortoise. The tortoise, somebody put a gopher tortoise in one of our collection stations last week, 2 weeks ago. And when the strander, we were just told, hey, it's a turtle. I'm dropping it off. Good to go. And they looked in there, and we have these little plastic containers in there, and we have a stack of rags that we use in the bottom. We moisten them and all that. And the gopher tortoise was on top of the stack of rags. It climbed up top, and it was just clawing its way trying to get out. So it was kind of funny. But the strander contacted me back and said, it's definitely not a sea turtle. So it's got claws, big claws, kind of. So.
Do all species start with the sargassum as youngsters? And if you were to be 20 miles out in the ocean and see a turtle in distress with no cell phone, what can you do?
First off, they don't all go right to the sargassum. From what I've learned or been told, pot, red are typicals like the greens and loggerheads and some of the others. They'll go out to the sargassum for their first year or so. The leatherbacks, notorious for not doing that, I've heard. They'll take off and they do their thing. They go all over. If you're out and you see one, you don't have cell connection, I'm trying to think, what am I taught to say and what would I say to do? No. If it's alive and it's injured, say it's a boat strike, just say it's floating 20 miles out, I would say with your safety as the paramount issue, don't injure yourself. Try not to injure the turtle any more than it already is. And you can get into all kinds of details about how you grab it and all that, depending on the wounds and all that. But I would say try to net it, try to gently get it up on your boat. If it's got a boat strike and it's still alive, it's moving, and then try to move in, as most expeditiously as you can, and then make your phone call to, if it's in our county, if you're coming into Port Canaveral, please call our hotline. If you're not, I'd say call FWC, and FWC, because they still tell us what to do. When we get a turtle, we have to call FWC and say, we've got a hatch, or we've got a juvenile green that was hooked at Port Canaveral, and they tell us where it goes. We don't make that call. I assume most of them are going to 99 whatever percent are going to go to the zoo, Brevard Zoo, but they tell us where it goes. We do releases for them. They tell us exactly the beach it gets released at. We don't make that call. The FWC, they are the rulers on that stuff, and we follow, the guidelines, the direction, all that stuff comes from FWC. But that would be my unofficial yeah, if you're out there and you can't contact somebody and you can help it, try to help it. The same thing I tell people that are on the beach here. I always say, call the hotline before you touch a turtle. However, if it's an immediate threat, if a coyote's going to attack it or something, without injuring yourself, with your safety being paramount, try to take an action to remove it from that threat. And once you've done that, then call the hotline. The hotline monitors, they'll walk you through the proper things to do at that point. And we would ask you if it's small, if it's a hatchling, we may ask you to take it to one of our collection stations or even a small post hatching or something. So if it's bigger, we may have you, even if you're at the beach, move it up, put it in the shade under a umbrella. Maybe even depending on the temperatures and what's going on that day, put a towel over it, moisten the towel and all that. So there's a lot of different things that it could lead to. And again, I always say call the hotline monitor if it's in Brevard County. Right.
Awesome. And then this is the last question that we're going to have time for today. Is there a common illness that sea turtles can get? Only FP tumors or anything else?
So they can get other things. We just had, they all blend together. I'm trying to think how long it's been. It was a few weeks ago. We had an adult turtle. No, it was a juvenile. No, it was an adult. It was a subadult. So it was not 90 centimeters yet, a subadult. So it was 60 plus centimeters. It was taken to the zoo and it had laid out. You know what? No, I'm mixing. This is another one. one that we had a necropsy done on. So this is one earlier in the year. It was laying out in the sun for a little while. It had actually got stuck underneath a crossover on a beach area down south. And we recovered it, but it was out in the sun for a few hours before we got a strander there, somebody to transport it. We got it transported to the zoo, and the necropsy came back. I was lucky enough, I asked about it, so they sent me the results of the or they verbally told me the results of the overarching things of the necropsy. And it had, it was almost like a pneumonia type thing. So they can get respiratory issues, kind of like humans. And I mean, they got lungs and all that stuff too. So it had respiratory issues that already took it down like less than 100% of physical statute there. And then that led to the physical exhaustion that actually ended up killing the turtle. So it wasn't just because it was cooking on the beach. There was other underlying respiratory issues that happened. And that was kind of, I'm not real familiar with all that stuff, but because we usually don't deal with that, you know, we look at the obvious things, you know, boat strikes, nose injuries. FP is not, it's not prevalent like in loggerheads. It's most common in green sea turtles more than any other sea turtle out there. I don't think, I've never heard of leatherbacks getting FP, but it's predominantly greens. And it's, FP is very tough because lots of studying going on. They're still not 100% sure. They can't say 100% how it transmits. If it's viral shed, definitely just viral shed. If it's, I can talk all day about stuff I've read, you know, even leeches that have it in their DNA, and is that transmitting it from turtle to turtle? And it's just, it's incredible. I mean, there's so many studies going on. And the one last Thursday from UCF that gave us a class, it was most interesting, but it was, I mean, it was just talking about all the DNA, breaking it down and all the little things within their DNA and the study and trying to find it. Okay, if this marker is the same as this marker, you know, across the numbers, is there something correlating that, hey, it's always happening in this, and they can't find that yet. So it's very tough. But what we're familiar with is FP tumors. They do get non-FP tumors, but they're not as prevalent. FP tumors usually, some of them are smooth, some of them have that papillary texture. It looks like cauliflower. That's probably the most common that I've always seen out here, where they do look like, it looks like cauliflower chunks hanging off. And the weird thing is, you leave it alone, sometimes FP just goes away. You know, they found turtles that had FP, they cleaned them up, they surgically removed FP, found it again, maybe it had FP. They found turtles that didn't have FP, had FP, they found the same turtle later, and the FP went away. And the FP is bad because it gets in their eyes. A lot of times you can't see it, it's down their throat. And then you don't know if you're physically just looking at it, like a guy like me, I'll look at it and go, it doesn't have FP. You know, we turn it in, they do x-rays and start really looking internally, and they start finding FP inside, and that's bad for them. So, but that's about all I know.
All right. Well, that about does it for today. Again, next time you're in Indialantic or up at the port, drop by Sea Turtle Preservation Society's Turtle House and Turtle Nest. And of course, up on the screen still is the Turtle Emergency Line. So make sure that you put that down in your phone under Brevard Turtle 911. Is that correct?
Yeah, Sea Turtle 911.
Sea Turtle 911. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks.